Today is the day. You may say to yourself after weeks of procrastinating on that important thing you had to do. As you sit down ready, full of motivation, ready to go ahead and do the work, do the thing that you've been delaying, something different happens. You feel boredom, overwhelmed, you don't know where to start, and overall things don't go as you wanted them to go. So maybe after this, you go to Instagram, you check a video on YouTube, you check your email, and maybe you do the cardinal sin of focus. You go to TikTok. Now, despite this, you may end up getting everything done. Maybe. However, even if that's the case, it will take you so much longer than it could have, and the quality is not going to be as good. Not as good as if you were to sit down with the task at hand and just do it focused for 1 to 2 hours straight. You'd build momentum, things would flow much better, and not only would it be done faster, you'd be proud of the work you did. But this way, what often will end up happening is just a lot of delaying, a lot of, never being focused on the task at hand, and so everything suffers. You probably end up with the feeling that you could have done more, that you could be more. If you have thought after this that if you were able to focus and sit down and just do this one thing at a time, that everything else would be better, well, you are correct. Unfortunately, that may not be the reality right now, but you can change things. That's the most important part here, is that just because it's not easy, it's not as good as you wanted it to be right now, does not mean it has to keep going like this. And that's what we're going to address in this video. I'm going to tell you the 3 main things I did and I do to essentially unstuck myself, especially in these moments when it is difficult, it is hard. How do you actually push past that initially? And more importantly, how do you set up the next days, the next weeks, the next months to make sure you're not even battling with this chaos in your mind, with this difficulty in getting the task done, and you can just sit down and do it. Now, the 3 main things you're going to be focusing on are number 1, removing distractions. Number 2, clarifying the task and the work. And number 3, sharpening the mind. With that said, let's start here on number 1, removing distractions. Now, this is pretty straightforward. It's pretty exactly what the title or what the title of this says, which is you got to remove the distractions. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, shitty foods that you eat obsessively, all of these things that you know that are not good for you, that you know that are bad for you, they must go away. When we look at what is required to complete a task, to just look at something and complete it, focus really is the main thing. First of all, you need the discipline to sit down and actually commit to doing it. And after that, you need to know, okay, I'm going to sit with this and I'm just going to do this one thing. Essentially, focusing means narrowing down our aim to as small of a point as we can, in this case, to the task at hand. And all these things that we talk about, all these distractions, they expand our aim, because our aim at this point diverges. It goes to YouTube, it goes to email, then a bit back to work, then to TikTok, and you just are not productive with the thing that you're doing. Now, when we're removing certain things, when we're removing distractions, it is always most important to remove the things that take the most time away from you, the things that you spend the most time on. Now, I could tell you, just identify those and then remove them. But often our view, our perception is very skewed, because time when we're on social media passes very different than time when we're working, especially if it's something that we don't really want to be doing. And because of that, the most accurate way to do this is go to your browser history. You may not be happy with what you're going to find, but go to your browser history on your computer first, and then look at the last 2 to 3 days and see in between work, where is most of your time going? What are the distractions that you're indulging the most in? Is it YouTube? Is it Instagram? Is it reading some things that you shouldn't be reading? Understand what that is. First of all, if you're more on the phone, if that's where you waste most of your time, just go to the section where you can see your screen time, and it's going to tell you where, most of the time is spent. Usually it's going to be on an app. Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube are going to be the main things here. After you've identified them, after you can have them in a list of things that I spend the most time with, and then go down from there, what you want to do now is, as we talked about already in the previous video, you want to remove them if possible. If these are apps on your phone, uninstall them. It doesn't mean that you can't access them ever again, but before you start work, or the morning before you go, the night before you go to bed, the night before your workday, your next workday, uninstall the apps. Most likely you don't need them. If you need to text some friends, you can text them after you're done with your work. You don't need to text them right away. Remove these apps if you don't require them for your work. Take them away. On your phone, of course. Now, on the desktop, that's harder because I don't like to suggest you to install a program to block things because there's always a way around them. It's going to be dependent on if you feel like following the thing or not. And so that, you can't really do such a thing. So the best way after that, if you can't remove them, is to hide all these things away. Now, when we're talking about hiding things, initially, let's say if you play a lot of video games, hide the PlayStation. Take the power cable, put it in one drawer. Then take the PlayStation, put it in another drawer. Same for the TV. Take the batteries out of the remotes. All of these things. Hide them away. That's ideally what you want to do. However, I know for most of you, the distractions we're talking about are going to be in the desktop, in the browser itself. As you access Instagram, you access YouTube, you access all of these distractions in the same place that you work. And because of that, it makes it much harder to actually follow through on removing it. It's pretty much impossible. Hiding it, it's also not easy. So the next best thing after those is to make it as hard, as difficult as possible to access these things. In this case, you may think, but how do I make it harder to access YouTube, to access Instagram? How do I do that? So the best way to do this in desktop, and honestly, the best way, first of all, is for you to commit that you're going to do the work. That's the best thing. But because I know that's not enough, you're going to just log out of all of these apps. Ideally, in the night before, when you're done with everything, you just log out and you don't say to save, to remember your login. Because on Instagram, for example, if you're not logged in, you can access anything. And so it's just an extra step. You have to think more about it. You have to type it. And so it's more time for you to be able to say to yourself, no, I'm not going to do it. And that's why I also say don't save your login, because otherwise just one click and it's kind of the same thing. Now, if we're talking about YouTube, you could say, oh, but then I can still access YouTube without being logged in. But if you do so, it's kind of boring because none of your suggestions are there. None of the content that you want to see is there. You have to type to search. And so it's going to make it harder for you. Once again, the step, remove if you can. If not, hide away. And if that's not possible, make it as difficult as you can to access these distractions. After that, step number 2 is going to be clarifying the work to be done. Now, when I say clarifying the work to be done, it's not in a vague clarifying sense. It's not just saying, okay, today at work, I'm going to be, writing these reports, or I'm going to be doing research for that. You want to clarify as much as possible. You're going to be writing, what are you going to be writing about? How many words? What is it about? What are the chapters about? Clarify it, all of this. Because often the overwhelm we're talking about, the hardship in start doing a task is because it's not clarified enough. It's because you sit down to write and then you realize, I can't write because I don't know what I'm writing about. I don't have the research done. I don't know how long I'm going to be writing for. And so it becomes very easy to trick yourself to be like, oh, I wrote 10 words, that's enough. Or to not even start. Because of that, you have to clarify. And the best way to clarify is not before you start to work, is you clarify, or it is before you start to work, but not immediately before you start to work. It is the night before. Maybe if you start working at 9 a.m., it's at 7 a.m. when you wake up and you clarify these things. You want to leave a certain time gap between you plan and then you do. Otherwise, the mind gets too cluttered, just too many things to think about, and it's also not good. Ideally, what I suggest is the night before, you clarify what you're going to be doing the next day. Then you wake up, you review what's going to be done so that when you sit down to work, you know exactly what needs to be done. You know exactly, okay, I'm going to write about this and the research is done. Or if the research is not done, I'm going to have to research this, and that. And then I'm going to go move on and do the writing. And what you're going to realize is that when things are very structured, very well structured like this, it makes it much easier to actually do them and not go into distractions and not go to your email, to your TikTok, to your Instagram, to all this bullshit. Because what you'll notice is that often it's not so much that you like checking these things, is that they're an easy escape from the overwhelm of doing the task. And finally, after you remove, hide, make it difficult to access the distractions, you clarify very clearly what you're going to be doing. The final thing is you have to train the mind. Because even if these things are very well set up, there's still going to be some days that are harder, you slept worse, you're not feeling your best, and you're still going to have to battle through. The best way here is you're going to have to train the mind. And when I say train the mind, a lot of times it's just untrained from all the bullshit that is learned. You just want to bring it to a baseline level as much as possible. What I mean by that is really become more mindful. Now, the first step in training the mind, like we're talking about here, is removing that which is not necessary. Meaning, especially in the morning here, this is when, a lot of times your morning is going to set the pace for the rest of the day. So the main thing, the best thing you could do for yourself to allow you to focus better and do the things you have to do not access social media before work. And if that's not possible, just don't check it right after you wake up. Just don't, because a lot of people do this. Maybe you do this. It's like the moment your alarm rings and you open your eyes, you stop the alarm and then you go on Instagram. And if you think about what this does to you, is that from the moment you wake up, you're giving yourself quick, cheap boosts, not boosts, but spikes of dopamine. You're training your brain to think that everything you're going to be doing needs to be boosting your attention like this, like this, like this. And that's not going to happen. Most things that you do are boring compared to that. When you sit down to write, it's boring compared to being on Instagram or TikTok. Your attention, or not your attention, excuse me, your dopamine is not spiking every 5 seconds when you're writing. It is a more gradual fulfillment. Obviously, it's much more fulfilling. However, in the short term, it doesn't feel as good. And as such, keep this under control as much as possible. What I suggest is don't even check it in the morning. Now, I know that may be hard. You may have this vice already. So at the very least, wait until after you shower. Please, at least that. And you'll notice just from doing that, things are going to be better. Now, the next best thing you can remove here, before we add we're going to remove, is do not eat super sugary foods in the morning. I know most of you probably don't. Most of you, not most of you, a lot of you will. If you're eating breakfast cereal, if you're eating pastries with a lot of sugar, if you're eating stuff like this, remove them. Cookies, all of these, do not eat this in the morning. It's the same concept as the dopamine spikes with, with social media. Because it's like you wake up, you go on social media, you put very sugary foods into your mouth, dopamine is just spiking, and then when you sit down, your body's going to be craving that. It's going to be your brain, social media, your body, sugary foods. On top of that, you'll notice, for a lot of people, this happens, is that if I eat very sugary foods, it's just my mind feels more cluttered. It's like more mental noise. It's harder to focus. So instead of eating your breakfast cereal or your cookies, just fry some eggs. Just boil some eggs. I don't know, oatmeal, something. Just don't go into these highly processed, high sugar foods. And if you do just these two things, you don't access social media in the morning and you eat some eggs instead of sugary foods, it's going to be so much easier already. It's not going to be, it's not going to be easy the first days because you're going to be craving them. However, give it a week and then you can come and thank me. Now, after that, after you remove, the main thing that you want to implement here, I'm not going to go too long. I'm just going to tell you one thing because I feel like it's better to just do one thing good than a bunch of things not consistently and not correctly. Meditate. I know I talk about this a lot, but when I say meditate, is literally you sit down, close your eyes, you breathe in and you breathe out. You can start with 5 minutes. If that's too much, start with 2 minutes. Now, it doesn't really matter if you do it right after you wake up, after you shower. For you to see like the most benefits right away, do it before you start working. So before you start working, you sit in your chair. It can be in your work chair. Ideally, I suggest another chair, just so your brain is not already like, okay, open the computer, let's check things. And you just sit down. Do that for 2 minutes, 5 minutes. 10 minutes is not ideal, but it's a pretty good number to aim at. And because by doing this, what you're doing essentially is a very quote unquote boring task. It's just you with yourself. There's no stimulus. At least when you're writing or working, there's that one thing to stimulate you to this one challenge. When you're sitting down and breathing, the challenge is just to not get up and go and start doing things, just to calm yourself and bring yourself there. And what this is going to lead to, and this is kind of the main point that we're looking at here, is the same when you eat a dessert and then you eat a fruit. Let's say if I give you a slice of cheesecake and you eat it, delicious, sweet, it's good. And then I give you an orange, even if it's a very sweet orange, it's not gonna taste sweet. It's gonna taste like shit. If you've done this mistake in the past, you know what I'm talking about. You can try it for yourself and you'll notice. Now, it is the same thing. When you're going from social media, all these, quick dopamine boosts to something that is not as engaging, it's the same as going from dessert to fruit. But as same as in the example, a fruit is much better for you than a slice of dessert, especially if it's on a regular basis. The same thing applies to our focus. And that's why if you go from meditation to work, it's like going from, bland oatmeal to fruit. The fruit will taste much sweeter. And even though it's not as sweet as the dessert, it's the contrast between the two that matters. And so when you go from just being still to doing something, it's going to be much more engaging than if you're going from high dopamine, quick dopamine spikes to then none of those. And as such, this is the main thing I suggest. This is the main kind of takeaway behind it. How are you going to do it? Search YouTube. There's plenty of ways to do it. The most basic is you just sit down and you focus on your breathing. And if you do these three things that we covered here, number one, you remove, hide, or make difficult to access the distractions. Number two, you clarify with as much detail as possible what is the work to be done and broken down into different steps. And then finally, you train your mind with meditation. You do this for a week, 2 weeks, you're going to notice drastic differences for the best, of course. Now, once again, I know this is not going to be easy to do, to finish the video here. I know it's not going to be easy. I know the first day you do this, you're probably going to, most of the time, going to be thinking, why am I even doing this? I just want to eat my breakfast cereal and go on social media. But you have to think about your future self. You from 2 months from now, 3 months from now, do you think he's going to be thanking you if you're just doing that? If you're just indulging in all this bullshit? Or do you think he will thank you if you cut out the social media, if you cut out these stupid sugars in the morning, you clarify your work and you actually meditate? You 3 months from now, 6 months, 9 months, is going to be thanking the you of today. And that's what you got to be thinking about. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you on the next video.